I'm Melissa, your host, and today's episode is a little bit of a behind the scenes look into the kind of work that sits at the heart of the International Association for the Study of Dreams conference, where dreams aren't just something that we analyze, but something that we stay in a relationship with over time. I'm joined by Marta Aarli, who is a psychotherapist, dream guide, writer, and also a board member of IASD. She's been in practice since the mid 90s with a background in transpersonal psychology, and her work spans not just psychotherapy and dream work, but also creativity through magic, sound journeys, and poetry, all exploring what she calls the imaginal realms. At this year's IASD conference, Marta is presenting a collaborative case study titled 35 Years of Nightmares: The Trauma Healing Journey of a Dreamer, His Therapist, and Dear Friend. And what's so compelling about this is it's not just about interpreting dreams, it's about staying with them over decades. This is a 35-year journey of recurring nightmares, and instead of trying to shut them down or fix them quickly, this work has unfolded slowly, relationally, and with multiple people involved: the dreamer, the therapist, and a close friend, each bringing a different perspective into what the dreams are expressing. So today we're going to explore what happens when nightmares are approached not as something to get rid of, but as something that might be asking for attention, for understanding, and possibly even for completion. Marta, thank you for joining me today.
Thanks so much for inviting me, Melissa.
Can you tell us a little bit about the case that you'll be sharing at IASD this year?
Yeah. So, first to say, this was the dreamer's idea to present this. Um, I met Renee 2 years ago at the Ashland Conference of IASD, and he's the one presenting. Um, the one who introduced us is Tina, and she will be presenting with us. And for about the past year, Renee and I have been doing intensive dream work with his nightmares. So he will be leading the panel really to tell his story about how he has struggled with extreme nightmares for 35 years and how he and Tina, as friends for many of those years, have worked on his dreams because she's also a dream worker in the arts. So collage and deep, um, in-person workshops together where a lot came up. And then she said, Renee, I think you need to meet my friend Marta. So she introduced us. We talked at the conference, and about a year later, we started doing this intensive work. So we've used multiple modalities to go back into his nightmares and start to really see what's going on inside, what part of these nightmares are about his own lifetime experiences since childhood, his family's experiences, his ancestors' experiences, and from there, what's the healing that's needed. So it's personal, it's family, it's ancestral. So it's taken us in a lot of different directions. So
Mm.
we'll just all be sharing together sort of what our part has been in supporting Renee on his journey in exploring these and starting to transform his feelings about the nightmares and the characters in them.
The 35 years is a long time to be having the same kind of experience. What's that been like for you to witness over the time you've been working with them?
Yeah. So in this year, um, I will say that when we started the dream therapy, the intensive dream work, I was quite worried about his health, because what would happen is he would wake up from these nightmares um, with an extreme nervous system reaction. And he was having chest pain and heart symptoms that were very scary. So the first thing I want to say is we went in very carefully to first tend to his heart, because I didn't want to jump in to scary dreams and re-entering them and inviting these characters before we really knew how is your heart, and what does your heart need, and how can we reassure your heart that we're not going to stress it anymore by the work that we're doing. So we started by uh, working with his heart like we would a dream. So he sort of re-entered his own body. He entered his body like we would a dream, to see and visualize his heart, and to visualize the chambers, and to talk to his heart and let his heart talk to him like we would do parts work in a dream.
Mm.
So we started by working with his body, because, we can do dream work with anything in our waking life, in our physical life. And I really wanted to make sure we were going to be safe and take care of him before we went into the nightmares themselves.
Mm. That's a really caring and smart way to do it. I know that sometimes after I have a really bad nightmare, I can get an upset stomach, and your body does feel stressed in the dream, like because of the dreams.
Mhm.
And then also the dreams or the nightmares can be coming because our bodies are stressed, and then it's our bodies trying to communicate. So
Right.
I'm curious about his dreams themselves. And obviously, you can't
Mhm.
give too much away with me now because this is just a
Mhm.
little pre-interview. But I'm curious if the nightmares for him were repeating in the same way, or have they been changing as the work unfolds?
Mhm. Yeah. They have been changing. And, after we did this heart kind of somatic work, then we worked with some of the not quite as threatening nightmares. Like he has a repeating theme of being chased by very scary, um, creatures or people. Mostly it's people. But what we did, again, in this sort of working up to that, was we looked at some scary dreams that weren't as imminently threatening, to find allies and to find protectors that he could draw on. Things that maybe seemed threatening at first, but when he closed his eyes, re entered, and felt into the dream again, he could see them differently and start to feel like, oh, maybe then they're not here to chase me. They're here to be with me and accompany me. So we went into some of those dreams, created some allies that he would then call in and literally visualize next to him or behind him. And some of these were animals. Animals are often such powerful presences, and they don't have all the complicated sort of human attributes. They just are grounding and present. So we did that work. Then we started to look at some of the human, um, attackers, or those chasing him. Or another theme was getting to a doorway and knowing something terrible was on the other side of that door, and then wanting to open it, but being too terrified to open it. So again, rather than pushing him to do, you know, to barge in, we just paused at the threshold, and he called in his allies and his animals and those dream characters. And he knew I was there with him too, right? I become an ally as the dream worker, and he could just stand at the threshold and work with his nervous system and know that when he's ready, when he chooses, he can open that door. But the pacing is so important. So that's been some of our preliminary work.
That's
Um,
really powerful in,
yeah.
giving him back the decision of when to make moves and checking in with the nervous system. And I suppose you'd be focusing on the heart and trying to stay
Mhm.
calm and all those sorts of things. I love
Yeah.
bringing in the animal allies. You know, animals really have such unconditional love. And I feel
Mhm.
that's something really helpful in the dream space. And what stood out to me, even within the dreams and within the work that you're doing, is that it's not just one on one work. So, how has having a close friend involved with shaping the process?
Mhm. Yeah. Well, they live in the same town. So, we do our DreamWork sessions on Zoom, but he sees his friend in person. So, when we start our session and we check in, he often says, "Well, I had this great conversation with Tina this week." And then he'll talk about what they did or talked about together, and or maybe a question that she asked, because she asks these amazing huge questions, and then he kind of goes, "Whoa." I let me think about that for a while. So she's always there as this very supportive, wise person who sees him and really loves him and doesn't shy away from these scary experiences. And so he'll process the dream work with her, the therapy with her, and then he'll process his conversations with her in our sessions. So, um, you know, therapy is always best when people have other support in their lives too. So we talk with our partners, our friends, our loved ones, and so she feels like such an ally in this. And because she's a dream worker too, but from a different angle, like from an artist's angle, she'll do collages with him. And then we have these visual pieces that they've created together or that he's created with her sort of facilitating. And then he'll send me the image and I'll have it up on my screen and we'll talk about the collage that he did with her. So it's this really nice weaving together of friendship, art, and creativity, the therapy, the dream work, his waking life experiences. It's very comprehensive.
Mm, that's really nice. It's shifting him from having a scary experience into something that's collaborative and creative. And, you know, with so many of you working on the dreams rather than him doing it on his own, there's so many different perspectives that are coming in. And I love that about dreams is that they often try to show us different perspectives anyway. And it's so
Mhm,
much helpful when you have somebody else or a few people helping you with them as well. It
mhm,
really goes beyond just the individual.
mhm.
Do you see
Yeah.
elements of intergenerational or family patterns coming through in the dreams like
Mhm,
he's having?
mhm. Yeah. One of the most really obvious ones is his grandfather. I think I'm going to get these details right. It's his grandfather, possibly it's his great grandfather, who he is named after. And what he remembers as a child is going to visit his grandfather and hearing him waking up screaming from nightmares,
Hmm.
just the way he wakes up screaming from his nightmares.
Wow.
So, we inherit names from our ancestors. We inherit their dreams sometimes. We inherit their trauma. We know epigenetically that traumas that go back 2, 3, 4 generations, even more, are passed down, and we don't know the stories cognitively in our brains, but we know them in our nervous systems. So, we've talked about, and even some of the images in his collages are sort of these ancient, stone buildings, or these, old cathedrals, or and I'll ask him about them, and he'll say, Well, I don't really know. That picture just, I just felt something and I put the picture in there. So images often speak to us when we don't have the literal story. And then our nervous systems also tell the story. So, do his nightmares reflect some lived experiences of his grandparents, great grandparents? Probably,
Mm, mm,
probably. If we look at white Europeans or North Americans, there were just hundreds of years of wars all over Europe for generations and generations. People were just slaughtering each other and destroying cultures, religions, whole countries. And so I think, again, he doesn't have the stories, but knowing his heritage, we can say, well, we know his French heritage, um, that there were bloody wars for, hundreds and hundreds of years
mm.
with many gruesome scenes. And so those come through. So some things we can just put together knowing history and knowing where someone lived.
Yeah, it shifts the way that we think about nightmares. Do you
Mhm.
see them as something to resolve or something that's still trying to communicate?
Yeah, I think nightmares can be different things. Um, Sometimes I think they want to tell a story for us to just know
Mm,
and say, okay, I know that my blood ancestors, or maybe more generally, my collective ancestors, have had these experiences. People have gone through these terrible, horrifying, you know, um, experiences in their lives, and I'm dreaming these stories. So sometimes we're a witness,
mm,
and we just understand the suffering in the world in a deeper way. Sometimes a nightmare is something that we can work with or change. Because if it's a dynamic that's happening internally, inside of us, like one part of us is really battling with another part, or our ego is so controlling that we are just killing off other parts of ourselves because they're kind of wild, or they're non-conforming, or they're a little bit weird or shameful, so the ego is just crushing them. So those kinds of dynamics we can work to heal. And in that way, this is a more general comment. I haven't done this with Renee so much, maybe a little bit, but we might be both the perpetrator and the victim in a nightmare. And so this way we can work on the inner um, aspect of a dream and say, if I'm really, beating myself up or killing off some part of myself, that I can change and resolve so that I don't keep doing that internally.
mm. Yeah, that's beautiful. What have you
Mhm.
seen over time doing your dream work that happens to someone once they start engaging with their nightmares instead of avoiding them?
Mhm. I find that people get more curious, and they can, instead of just immediately shutting out a character or a nightmare, an experience, they'll say, I wonder what that's about, or I wonder what that's trying to tell me. Because they can start to see, oh, it's not just here to, make me feel terrible. It's here to teach me something or help me see something. It's here to help me. And you wouldn't think that if you haven't done some nightmare work. You would just think, oh, why would I want to go back in there? But once you start, you realize, wow, there's almost always an ally, a protector, a positive message, a way out that I hadn't seen before. I just worked with someone today who had someone show her a secret doorway in her fence that was glowing with light, you know. So suddenly there's this new passageway that we can go. So nightmares almost always give us something like that.
Mm, a great, like a different perspective, a new outlook. I feel that
Mhm.
it can flow through into your waking life as well. And then you become a little bit more curious about the situations you might feel you're stuck in, or people are chasing you, and there's different ways out.
Mhm.
So I love that. I'm
Right.
curious, what got you into doing dream work?
Well, it started as when I was a kid. I had nightmares.
Hmm.
I had lots and lots of nightmares, and I was afraid of the dark, and I woke up a lot in the middle of the night, and I was too scared to even call out because I just thought, well, if I call out, then these scary creatures are going to come get me. But sometimes I would call out, my mom would come in, and this went on for years. So then I naturally got more interested in high school. I think I read my first book about dreams, and it was about nightmares. And then I just started reading more and more and started writing my dreams down as a teenager. Of course, I wish I had written them more because it would be great to look back at them now. Um, and then, once I started studying psychology, that was just a natural direction to go in. And I now have a bookshelf with about 60 dream books on it, and it's always growing. I've studied many, many different approaches. And I think each dream really needs its own unique approach. No two people are the same, no two dreams are the same. So I'm always thinking, what does this dream need, or how can we get into this dream? And so I draw from a lot of different approaches.
I love that. You're looking at every angle possible. And,
Hmm.
it's great to hear of psychologists who are using dreams and looking at dreams as well, because you're looking at the whole person, not just their conscious mind, but their soul as well. So props to you
Hmm.
for doing all of that.
Hmm. Yeah.
So, for the people who are going to be in the room with you at IASD, what can they
Hmm.
expect to take away from your presentation?
Hmm. Yeah, I think people will really see, well, the importance of relationships, the importance of sharing our dreams and having allies along the way, seen and unseen, right? Um, from the dream world and in our waking life. And they'll see how, if they stay with it, they can really track what's theirs to resolve or work with in a dream and what's not theirs and what they can let go of because it's clearly an ancestral experience. Um, I think they'll see the value of connecting dreams together over time because we'll look back at dreams from months ago or years ago and see the patterns because then we can see how it's changing.
Mm,
Um, what else? I think the dedication that Renee shows in staying with it because it's really hard and his doctor wants him to take medication,
mm,
and some of that is to suppress the dreams because she's worried about him getting overwhelmed, and he, at least right now, does not want to take that. He wants to remember them, so he is so dedicated to this process. And I think it also really speaks to um, working with a experienced, trained dream worker because there's so many nuances, and The pacing is really important. Um, like we talked about at the beginning of this conversation, and letting him stay in control and having the choices along the way. Yeah, I
Yeah, those
think
are
those
all
would be the
things that really
choices.
strengthen a person,
Mm-hmm,
strengthen the character. I love the
mm-hmm,
idea of letting go of things that aren't yours, or even just
mm-hmm,
understanding that some of the ancestral stuff can be why you are the way you are, but you
mm-hmm,
can then soften around the edges because it hasn't directly happened to you. So that's
mm-hmm,
great. For someone listening right now, if they're experiencing recurring nightmares, where would you suggest that they start?
mm-hmm. Um, if they are really scary, traumatizing nightmares where they're waking up in a heightened state with their nervous system, I really advise starting with a dream worker, not just jumping in by yourself with a book, because with lighter dreams or more pleasant dreams, I think that's fine. But when there's trauma involved, whether it's ours or not, we need support. So I think IASD has many really skilled dream workers, and so finding someone that you're a good match with, because you'll need to go slowly and create your allies, create your safety, take care of your body and your nervous system. So I would not say to jump in on your own
Mm.
to
Yeah.
start with. Once you get more comfortable, then you'll feel strong enough to go in on your own.
That's
Or if you join a dream group, as long as the dream group leader is also really experienced and can hold the nightmares, and that the group can. Not all groups are open to big, really scary nightmares.
great. Yeah.
So, yeah, finding the support, I think, is really
Yeah.
important.
That's good. And like you said, with IASD, there is so much support out there. So it's dropping a message in the Facebook group or, looking on the website
Mhm.
and finding a list of all the accredited teachers. And yeah, it's a
Yeah.
great idea. Now, before we wrap it up, I always love to ask, do you have a personal dream of your own, a favorite one, or something recent that you feel coming up that you would like to share?
Mm, let's see. Gosh. All right, I'll share a really short one. It's not a nightmare. I'm sitting here, I'm looking at my other screen because I'm writing a book on dreams, and I'm on the nightmare chapter right now editing. Um so okay, maybe I'll share one of my favorite nightmares.
Okay.
Strange as
I
that
love
sounds.
that.
This
A
is
favorite
one of my
nightmare. I love that.
favorite nightmares. So this was from some years ago, but so I in the dream, I wake up and I'm thirsty. So I walk into the kitchen to get a drink of water. And from the basement stairs, I see this kind of translucent, creepy character come whooshing up the stairs and past me, and she stands at the kitchen counter hunched over with her back to me. And I am terrified. And I cower down on the floor next to the refrigerator, and I don't know what's going to happen. And she's all dirty and tattered, and her hair is stringy. And she turns around slowly, all hunched over, and she looks at me, and she opens her mouth, and she has fangs. And I know that she's a vampire. And she looks like me. And she hisses at me, and I put on my meanest, scariest face to fend her off.
Wow. And what
That's
did
one of my
you?
favorite nightmares.
I love that you hissed back at her or whatever it was you did to. Rawr. What did you
Yeah.
pull from that dream, or what do you feel like it was trying to show you or tell you?
Yeah.
Glad you.
This, I write about this in my book because I worked with this dream multiple times, and I had more vampire dreams after this one over a several year period. So this vampire part of me um, changed over time, but it began with me working with this first dream and really feeling so sad for her, so compassionate towards her. I could see that she was really hungry. She was really thirsty. She was really desperate. She was suffering. And so I was able to um, look at what she needed. And through associations and vampire lore, which I got into, you know, I I contacted this theme in vampire stories of unrequited love, and some stories say a vampire is turned into a vampire through a curse or through another vampire to live eternally without love. And so it's this sense of longing and the desire for love. So I was able to look at my life at that time and realize how lonely I was, how I felt I never would find love. I didn't feel lovable. I was thirsty, for life energy, for blood. If blood is our life energy, I was drained
Mm.
at that time in my life, and I needed more love. So I started to love that part of myself. And in for you'll have to read the book. That'll
Yeah, I
be
can't
coming
wait.
out soon. But in the further vampire dreams, she transformed into a different kind of vampire and then into a different kind of person, a very magical person after that. But it took years. So for me, it was about self love
Mm.
and what I needed to heal within myself to then be able to really grow and become my magical self that also had a sense of humor and um, could heal that part of myself.
Mm. What a powerful story. I could see why it's your favorite nightmare because it's turned you towards, loving yourself. And it's such an important thing to be able to do. And sometimes you don't realize that you don't love yourself until you
Mhm.
experience something like that. And I mean, you probably did still love yourself, but not in the way that you needed to fulfill you. So that's
Mhm.
beautiful. That's really
Yeah,
powerful.
yeah.
I loved this interview with you because it reminds us that even the dreams that we fear the most aren't random and they're not working against us and they're persistent for a reason. And sometimes instead of trying to get rid of them, the real shift happens when we begin to listen slowly over time and in relationship. This is the kind of work that's explored at IASD, where dreams are taken seriously as part of the healing process, not just something to analyze and move on from. So, for the listeners, if this conversation sparked something in you, I'd really encourage you to follow that thread, whether that's paying closer attention to your own dreams or exploring spaces like the IASD Conference, where this work is happening at a really deep level. Marta, thank you so, so much for coming and sharing all of this. We're looking forward to your book. We're looking forward to your presentation, and we can't wait to just keep following you along on your journey.
Thanks so much, Melissa. Really appreciate it. Great to
Thanks.
talk with you.
Awesome. And listeners, as always, tonight, just notice what your dreams are still trying to show you and write them down.